Okay, well, now I've put the trestle in the space that we had cut out previously and lined the track up in line with both ends on the bridge and on the main line. And then I put in a rigid piece of wood. In this case it's probably 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch across the ties on the trestle as well as on the ties on the roadbed. And then I clamp those. And what that does is it sandwiches the ties so that they are flush across the gap between the trestle and the roadbed. That ensures that when this is complete, when I lay the rail is going to go across that gap level and smooth. The same thing applies at the opposite end of the trestle. These two pieces of wood are clamped at this end, and the pressure down ensures that the ties are flush across the joint between the bridge and the trestle. You'll recall earlier that I told you that I built 3 bends and tripled them up and braced them with diagonal bracing to support the Howe through truss bridge. That doesn't line up as well to support the stringers of the trestle. So I built a 4th bent on the back side of this triple that stretched up to the underside of the stringers, and that supports the end of the trestle. So you can see here, this is the 4th bent here, which actually runs up higher to the underside of the stringers and supports the end of the trestle. So once I remove the clamps and these strips of wood off the top, I get rid of them, and now I can be quite free to lift the through Howe truss bridge completely out of the scene, and am free now to work on the scenery and fill this open gap in. The bridge is completely intact. When the scenery is done, it's simply now a matter of reinstalling the bridge back between the 2 trestles and rail joiners on the rails at each end, which will hold it in place, and back in business. The trestle leading into the Howe through truss bridge is complete, proper angles, and then what I've done is I've taken a strip of corrugated cardboard and laid it underneath the bottom of the bends. I secured them with hot melt glue so that now makes this quite rigid, and there's no movement in here at all. Next, what I'll do is I'll start bringing in some cardboard strips across here, creating a laced effect that I can then put the hard shell over and close this area in, ready for finished rock work and scenery. The same thing applies back in here in that first trestle, the one that's got the slight curve. Again, there's a base in here. It's now just a matter of putting some laced cardboard strips in here, closing that in, and also ready to go. This will give you an idea of what the scene will look like eventually, with the first trestle coming on the left through a rock cut, trestle continuing onto the through Howe truss bridge, trestle going off into that rock cut over on the far side. So this will have quite a nice effect of a variety of heights and types of construction, eventually having the waterfall cascading down underneath the bridge itself. A few final notes. Now that I've put in some bracing that ties across these bends here to secure it all, I'll be putting in NBWs in here. I'll drill these and I'll put the NBWs in to add the detail in here. The other thing that I'll do after the scenery is in place is some cross bridging between the bends to keep the lower part in line. There's usually timbers go across between them, but if I do that now, it's going to be very hard to put the plaster and the detail back in between the bends, so they'll be done afterwards. The other thing you want to note is that in the past I've tried to put in bends after the deck was in, and one of the methods I used was to put a rubber band over underneath like this, and hope that that would hold it up in place. One of the problems that I found was that I was always trying to work with the existing scenery that was in here. The other problem is that there's really a little bit of difficulty in getting these to be square and plumb. And so I discovered that it was much easier to build the trestle upside down on the table, where I had the freedom of space on the table, not trying to work in amongst a lot of scenery, especially if I had all this scenery already complete in front of it. The stain that I've used, as I said earlier, was shoe dye. Those two colors, the black and the dark brown, and they're mixed with denatured alcohol. The lumber that I've used is all from Mount Albert Scale Lumber Company, and the NBWs, and there's many sizes and shapes of washers, but they come from Grant Line products. There'll be plates, different sizes of washers, different sizes of nuts and bolts that can add the scale detail to the model. I'll be adding the fire barrel in here in one of the last steps. The rail will be put in shortly, and next I'll be going to close all this in with some cardboard strips, lace it all up, put my hard shell, and I use hydrocal with paper towels dipped in a soupy mix of hydrocal. That'll create a very hard shell that'll close this in, and then I'll come back and apply plaster Paris as a finish surface with some castings, some hand-carved rocks, and then we'll proceed with the finishing of gravel and weeds and small trees and shrubs and so on.